So for those of you who haven't been on YouTube and haven't noticed, there has been a drop in Unearthed Arcana, character origins. So if you if you haven't had enough of Unearthed Arcana character origins discussions, kind of like every channel under the sun has talked about it, but people did request last week that I give my opinion on the rules, since I have plenty of opinions about everything, and so this is probably a good thing to sort of have an opinion on. Uh, I'm going to talk about it, and that means I'm going to run a poll. I'm going to have to say right now that there's no way that I can cover everything the way I would like to. And I looked at my notes and I have 6 pages of notes. So normally I do a presentation, and then after I've done a presentation, I open up to Q&A. I can't do it that way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep my phone going, and I'm going to keep an eye on the chat as I do this, since there is so much to discuss and the packet is huge. It's monstrous. So that's what I'm going to do. And and then I'm going to have a discussion. I have to say right now, there's lots of really good stuff in here, and there's some stuff that I'm not so sure about, some other stuff I don't like. As with anything, my suggestion is get some food, some drink, get comfortable, make sure you're ready. We're going to do our very best to get this done in a timely manner, but I can't guarantee anything. There's a lot. Okay. Dartmain, hello Dartmain. You are not too early, not at all. If you think I'm setting things up, it is because I am setting things up. I'm kind of aware that one of my biggest problems is going to be keeping a track of everything that you guys are saying. And so I am trying to make sure that I have it sort of reasonably well lined up to deal with that. And I want to give people time to jump into the chat. I don't normally do that sort of thing, but as my sort of camera fires up, I'm going to do that just for that very purpose. Don't feel like you need to answer the poll straight away, people. It's perfectly fine to have an opinion later on, because you can't change your choice. So once you've made your choice, you're done. So it's all right to plug in a choice on this later. Okay, all right. We are pretty much ready. I have to say that I had to do a lot of research. It took me all week to piece everything together. I've never had to work quite so hard since Tasha's Cauldron of Everything came out. Like, that was a lot of work. And we are waiting for Fred's live stream to come up on his phone. You're fine. Take your time. Yeah. So am I live? Can I actually see myself live? Because that would be helpful. There it is. There it is. There it is. Right. So I've been quite jestful. I think there's some truth to what I've just pumped in there. Hi, Ranger. How's it going? Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm always kind of behind everybody else when it comes to doing things, just because, look, I have had a busy week. Let's get real. My week has been busy. And anyway, let's actually get into this. Hi, welcome to HowtoDandD. My name is Fred Weller, and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. We could talk about Lord of the Rings, but I thought it was timely to sort of throw this out here and say one ring to rule them all, because now we have one D&D. And I could not help but make the analogy of all these different rings in Middle-earth being brought together by one powerful, evil but all-powerful ring. And it's almost like Wizards of the Coast by saying we are now creating, there's no more 8 editions, we're just having one D&D. It's not like I haven't heard that speech before. So we're now taking one D&D and we're taking, forget about all the 8 editions. We're not doing any more 8 editions. Even though we're making lots of changes, that's what an 8 edition is, people. So there's definitely been a concern around marketing that they don't want to lose those people who love Dungeons and Dragons 5e. Let's get real right now. That's definitely a big thing. So this is the Unearthed Arcana 1 D&D character origins packet 1. Like, there's supposed to be multiples of these. There's a huge amount of material in this thing. I can't tell you how surprised I was by the fact that they just didn't seem to stop. Like it didn't stop. So I was going to use like the whole screen to show you me, but I want to make it abundantly clear we are dealing with HowtoDandD and how to playtest. And I want you to go and have a look at the packet. For those of you who are like, what are we talking about? Go and look at the packet. In the description of this video, you will find it if you don't know about it. Please, when the surveys come out on the 1st of September, please respond to them. Otherwise, your voice is lost. And you need to affect the game. They won't listen to everything you have to say, but they will at least listen to some of what you have to say. And that's important, and as far as I'm concerned. Okay, let's get into the nuts and bolts. I could usually pull up and show you exactly what I'm doing and show you the actual packet and go through everything step by step. But because I actually need my notes in front of me, I'm not doing that. Instead, I'm looking at my Google Doc with 6 pages of notes, and rather than showing you something else, okay? That's, I think, going to be the best way. Hi, Mike. How's it going? You get to play your first game with the new rules. Okay, right. Let's just talk about like what are we dealing with here. This is going to be Dungeons and Dragons 6th edition. Like there have been a lot of people saying this is 5.5. Wizards of the Coast would like to say that this is actually 5e with just a few alterations. It really isn't that. It is definitely a completely different game. And you're going to say, well, no, there's some things that like most of it hasn't changed. Like that's always been the case, people. Like, you know, the same ability scores exist. We still have attack rolls. We still have saving throws. We still have ability checks. We still have skill checks. They all exist. Like we still have damage dice. Like these things don't really change. Okay, it doesn't really matter to a large extent what edition of the game. Even if you go right back to the very beginning when TSR was pumping things out before Wizards of the Coast. So let's get real. There's been a lot of changes. So I had a look at what Nerd Immersion had to say, Ted. I had a look at what Trent Monk had to say. And I am of the opinion, and I have always been of the opinion, that we were looking at Tasha's was 5.5. This is a different edition of the game. And I will explain because there's lots to say. But I was also wrong about one of my assessments. At this point, I think I'm incorrect in one of the things that I was saying. And one of the things I was saying is that we are looking at changes that are taking us back to 4e, Dungeons & Dragons 4e. And I think that may, in fact, be incorrect because they've done a few things I was not expecting, which is actually a really good thing. I don't want to go back to 4e. I believe a virtual tabletop is potentially taking us back to 4e. And a three-dimensional tabletop, that's definitely 4e stuff. Now, is that a bad thing? I played and Dungeon Mastered in 4e. There were good things and bad things about it. Would I ever go back to playing 4e? No, I wouldn't. But this isn't the same thing. Like, they have actually done something different. Ranger, thank you for the super chat. $350? I don't know what ZAR is, but thank you. Was wondering how badly is this is going to break 5e. Thanks for doing this. So as far as I can tell at this present time, the focus is on the player characters, and unfortunately at this point, as far as I can tell, and based on what they've done so far, you really are not getting a lot of support as a dungeon master. So breaking the game, some of it will. I think ultimately the game is already broken. Like, if you're worried about new things coming in that would break the game, like, the game is already broken. And most dungeon masters who aren't running new players through the game change all of their monsters. And there's nothing they're not altering. Like, it's pretty significant because they can't run the same stuff. Wow, Rangers, thank you for $30. That's a lot. I do appreciate it. So let's get into it. I want to start with the rules glossary because I feel like this is the primary mechanics of the game rather than the nuances of backgrounds and feats and races and stuff like that. We will talk about that, but I want to do the rules glossary first, okay? Spells are now broken up into 3 categories. Now, that's arcane, divine, primary. This will hopefully simplify the spellcasting class spell lists. When you looked at the back of the player's handbook, every class had their own spell list. Now, my hope is their idea is we only need 3 lists, and the classes are they just pull from one of these lists, and that's it. That would be great if that's how it works. I don't know how they were going to manage around something like a bard or a paladin, or maybe the paladin would just be divine. I'm not entirely sure. But if that's to simplify things, that would be great. I wouldn't say this is dramatic in terms of any alteration to the game itself. I think this is just a housekeeping and make it simpler and require less variation across the classes. I encourage this. I actually think this is a really good development, just having 3 categories of spells. Okay, rolling dice. Like if you roll a 1, so if I take a 20-sided dice and I roll a 1, in the past, we had some various things that might happen depending on what you were doing. This one on that 20-sided dice did a few different things. Well, now, it's not just a failure on an attack roll. If you make an ability check, if you make a skill check, if you make an attack roll, if you make a saving throw, now, basically, that's a failure. Now that's actually really good because that's elegant, it covers everything, it's easy to understand, there's no variation going on here. I actually applaud this. This is a good move. It's the sort of thing that I would have done myself if I ever get to altering the rules, which I may not need to do. It's ultimately really simple, it's elegant, it's a mechanical adjustment that actually isn't going to be that difficult because a lot of people are already doing this. And in my opinion, it's about time they did that. So great. A 1 on a d20 is always a failure. Now, if you roll a 20, which is the big one, this is the one that we really want the most, is when we roll our dice, we really want to get that 20, right? That's the 20. So usually for an attack roll, a 20 was a automatic hit. No matter what the modifiers were applied, didn't matter if you had advantage, disadvantage, penalties, nothing. It was just, it hit. And it wasn't just a hit, it was a critical. But let's get back, we'll get to that shortly. So now, with regard to rolling a 20, that means we always get success on ability checks and skill checks and attack rolls, as we have in the past, and on our saving throws now. So right across the board. And again, simple, elegant mechanical adjustment, and in my opinion, about time, because it used to confuse the hell out of everybody when you did that. Like, having a differentiation was not helpful at all, particularly to new players. No, a 1 was only a failure for an attack roll, but now it's a failure for every 20-sided dice roll you make. It doesn't matter what type of 20-sided dice roll it is, it's always a failure on a 1, and that wasn't the case in the past. So this is good. I despise the idea of awarding inspiration to a player for rolling a natural 20 on a 20-sided dice, because it's ultimately unnecessary. It's an unnecessary reward for already being lucky, and it can be exploited by players by forcing more rolls into the game. So now when you roll a 20, you get inspiration, which means you now have advantage on a dice roll that's a d20 at some point. Okay, which is interesting in terms of let's award inspiration a different way. I'll get to inspiration more shortly. I don't like this. One of the things that I think will wind up happening is players will try to figure out ways to force the Dungeon Master or get the Dungeon Master to allow them to roll more dice. The more time you roll dice, the more likely you get a 20, the more likely you get advantage. Now, not every player is going to do this. Will it come up a lot? I don't know. I think it needs to be tested. But I don't like the concept ultimately. I feel like this is just trying to figure out how to award inspiration more into your game. And I think they have kind of lost the plot with regard to this. There are lots of ways you can get inspiration now. What's that, Mike? 5 spell lists like Magic the Gathering? Well, I mean, I guess they're just trying to keep it simple. And 3 is fine as far as I'm concerned. We'll see. I mean, I don't know what it depends on what they do with the classes as to whether it's going to work out or not. All right. So, so let's talk about critical hits, because now that we have talked about the fact that when you roll a 20, it's a critical hit, well, there's some things that have changed with that critical hit. Things that a lot of people are not very fond of, and I would have to say I kind of understand. Now, here's what they've done. Critical hits only apply to a player character. That means it's not going to apply to your monsters. It doesn't apply to the Dungeon Master's NPCs. You can never roll a critical hit with a monster or an NPC ever, which makes characters even stronger than they were before. They're already really strong. Like, player characters are very, very tough. And as soon as you get to about, I mean, some of them even at level 1 are like bat crazy strong. They can deal with most things. So you've nerfed the monsters, you've made the characters even stronger than they were before, and I hate this for obvious reasons. This is a marketing ploy. I know the designers have said the reason for doing this is because if you're level 1, which you're not level 1 for very long, people, like you're not even level 1 or level 2 for very long, or even level 3. You usually, the first 3 levels buzz by like super fast. This is your critical point where your character is likely to die, right? If you're going to die at all, that's where you're probably going to die, rather than at the higher levels, because at that point you really got so much available to you, you can do pretty much anything. They've said that the reason for getting rid of critical hits for monsters and NPCs is so that we don't wind up with party wipes and people losing their character at level 1 or 2. When in fact, most of the time in 5e, I think that's the only time that people are generally in bulk losing their character. So I don't agree with doing this. I think this is a very bad thing to do. And it also breaks the whole concept of trying to keep things blanketed in general so that it's easy to understand and remember. Hi, Jonathan. How's it going? I am obviously behind on the chat, so I have a quick catch up here. Yeah, so yeah, that's right. A lot of people already used natural 1 was a critical failure and a 20 was a critical success. No matter what it was. Doesn't matter what sort of dice roll it was, as long as it's a 20-sided dice roll, right, Ranger? Well, no. If a player has advantage and rolls a 1, can't that take that advantage away now? Ah, yes. So that's right. That means that advantage won't work on a natural 1, and advantage wouldn't necessarily work on a well, it wouldn't need to matter, or even disadvantage wouldn't work on a natural 20. I don't know that that's necessarily how it's supposed to be, but it's a good point to consider. Okay. Yeah, Jonathan, I agree. Hi, Craig. How's it going? Yeah, I've never done that myself, Craig. Craig Watson. Hi, how's it going, man? I've never done that. I think this inspiration I'll talk about more, and how I think inspiration should work in the game, but the way that they've done it here, I don't like. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, it's only affecting the first few levels, and they're not there for very long. So I just don't think that it's necessary to do this sort of thing. So here's the next thing that they've done, which actually is kind of interesting, and that is only weapon and unarmed strikes can have a critical hit. So that favours the martial classes. That means you can't have a critical hit unless it's a weapon attack or an unarmed strike. So that means that spells can't crit. Yep. That means that monster special abilities or special abilities don't crit. Well, monsters already know they're not going to crit. They can't crit anymore. Not with these rules. Okay. I'm not a fan of this. I actually think that they should have, if it's going to work for... If you're going to have critical hits working for player characters only, why are we only making it the martial classes that it can critical? Like, that doesn't make any sense. There is plenty of spells, and I suspect the reason might be Fireball. Because Fireball, if you could critical hit with a Fireball, how would you critical hit? Because you can't. It's a saving throw. The monster's making the saving throw. That doesn't mean when the monster rolls, or the creature being affected by the Fireball rolls a 20 on their success, that doesn't mean that you're going to get hit by a bigger Fireball, because it doesn't work that way. It's only going to affect spells that have an attack roll in terms of increasing the damage. And the only damage dice that get doubled now, you don't double all the dice that you would roll in your critical hit. You only roll the weapon dice. They're the only thing that you double for a critical hit. So no sneak attack, no smiting damage, which nerfs the rogue and the paladin for critical hits. I actually have no issue with doing that ultimately, but because it's not consistent across the board, I actually think, even though it has always been optimal for a rogue or a paladin to have a critical hit because of their sneak attack and because of their paladin smites, just for simplicity, even though it would be quite powerful for them to retain it, I think we should just keep it, in my opinion, just to make it nice and easy to remember and understand, in my opinion. I'm looking at the game in terms of, if we bring in new people, and how do we make them make it so that they keep coming back. Right. So now the critical hit rules have been made significantly more complex, and there are some moronic changes that have been made. But I would also say that there has been some elements, not so much around critical hits. I feel like critical hits is where they have fallen apart. They haven't really gotten the gist of what they needed to achieve with this, unfortunately. I'm going to talk about inspiration, but I want to catch up with the chat, because I know I'm not going to be able to just make this work easily any other way. Low levels. Big Clue. Hello, Big Clue. How's it going? Yes, I absolutely agree, Big Clue. The changes to critical hits are probably the worst and the most confusing out of all of them. There's too much variation going on here. Keep it simple. Keep it the same. That's right. Yes, I would say yes. You're correct that critical hits, although critical hits occur a lot more than they did in some of the previous versions of the game. Yeah, and how you award inspiration, which I'm going to talk about in a second, is really important, right? It's like it should be up to the Dungeon Master. Hi, Pat Sherwood. So Pat Sherwood is a patron, for those of you who don't know. Thank you, Pat, for showing up today. Hello. Okay. Yeah, that's right. So a monk will always be able to crit, will always crit with the unarmed strike. Yeah, I know. I know. So monk for the win. So let's talk about inspiration, because they've done something with the inspiration rules. Some of it I actually think are very good, and some of it not so great. The criteria for awarding inspiration is kind of bizarre now, and frankly, I would say all it needs to say is the Dungeon Master can award inspiration to the player's character or to the player for anything they think is worthy. Right? Don't have any criteria for how you award inspiration. You could have a list of suggestions, but I think ultimately, because every Dungeon Master does it differently. Okay, so you might as well just put it in their wheelhouse completely. Because this is how people do it now, is everybody's awarding inspiration differently if they use inspiration. Some Dungeon Masters don't even use it. I actually think that inspiration should probably be just a Dungeon Master tool and a variant rule. Like, if you want to use it, you use it, and if you don't want to use it, you don't use it. And it's as simple as that. Somehow, the changes around inspiration, so they're trying to give you more ways of getting inspiration. That's why rolling a 20 on a 20-sided dice gives you inspiration. That's why some of the races get inspiration. That's why a lot of the features will be giving out inspiration. They're trying to find ways of giving you more inspiration, because somehow the design team have assumed that the reason that players don't use inspiration is because they are saving it up for an important dice roll. Now, that might have been the case in the past, But I would say, based on my experience and what I've discussed with other people, is that generally what's happening is the fact is players forget they have inspiration. It's just they forget they actually have it there at all. They forget that they can apply it to somebody else's dice roll and not just their own. Okay? And then there's another thing that cropped up, and my group spelled it out, and I was like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. There's another reason why players don't use inspiration. And it's not just because they forget. And my players said it to me, and all of them said the same thing. And I was like, oh my God, you're right. This is what they said. We're so powerful now, Fred. Even when you change all the monsters, we don't need inspiration. We don't actually need to roll advantage. I mean, maybe if we roll a 1, but other than that, we really don't need to roll advantage. So I used to give out inspiration at the very beginning of the session, before we even started sometimes. In the first 15 minutes, somebody might fart or burp, and I say, everybody gets inspiration. Just so that I remembered to give it out. And they still didn't use it. And at the end, I'd say, you guys didn't use your inspiration. And they said, well, we can't bank it, right? And I said, well, no. And they said, well, it wouldn't have mattered anyway because we didn't need it. We did fine. We're all good. Like, they don't need it. So that's what's going on. Not the other thing, not the banking thing. That might have been a concept in the past. But now people just forget it, or they just don't need it. They're so strong. Jay Lauren, how's it going, Jay Lauren? Has been streaming for hours now. No, I've been streaming for the last 6 days. It's amazing I haven't died yet. Big clue. Short, sweet, to the point, as usual. Well said, Fred. Inspiration. Yeah. Last more than 8 hours. Look, I personally think that inspiration shouldn't be something that just gets used up at the end of the session. I actually like the idea. There's a change to how you lose inspiration that I like. So I'm going to talk about that, okay? So I know where you're going with this, Ranger, and I will discuss that. Now, losing inspiration when you start a long rest. I like that. I like that much more than you lose inspiration at the end of your game session and you can't carry it over to another game session. I think that is a much smarter use of it, because sometimes when you give out inspiration, you might be just near the end of a session. I know this has happened to me, and they just don't have anything to die. There's no dice roll to occur, so I've awarded it. There's only been 15 minutes, but we never actually had to roll any dice, so they didn't need the inspiration. They didn't get to use it, so they lose it. So I actually prefer the idea that the long rest is when you start a long rest, you lose it. Again, I think the idea is probably better that you only can ever have one inspiration, and that you can just bank it. I mean, not bank it, but you don't lose it. So you retain it, and it doesn't matter whether you take a long rest or you get to the end of a session and don't use it in your session. I don't think there should be a time limit. I think you just, once you've got it, you got it, and then you just use it when you need to, and that's it. I think that's probably a better way of going about it. That means that most people will have at least one inspiration whenever they usually need to have it, if they need to have it. But then again, it's not going to necessarily affect that natural one, right? Because no modifiers affect the outcome. It's like that's it. So I like that. Now there's some major changes with some of the rules, and I am so pleased to see what they've done with Grapple and Shove. So let's. I will talk about that in a second. Yeah. Look, I don't. Yeah. So it's harder to remind people to use inspiration when you're online. When you're in person, I used to just drop a 20-sided dice in front of them as a reminder. So that was very helpful. Or we had like a pull of 20-sided dice, and the group would get inspiration, and anybody could pull from that pull when they needed to. So it wasn't assigned. It was, you would earn it as an individual maybe, or as a group, but the group could use it whenever they wanted to, and they would just pull the dice out, and then at the, you could tell how many were left. Okay, yes, that's exactly what I'm thinking, Jonathan, in terms, they just used to forget. It does depend. Look, again, I feel like dungeon masters should just have right wholesale. They decide how they award it. Yep. The way that they had listed how you award inspiration is basically you had to play to your floor, and players hated that. It was so difficult to award inspiration, which is why most dungeon masters changed that, and for very good reason. Yeah, look, so let's talk about grapple and shove. So the grappled condition now imposes disadvantage on attack rolls. I'm actually glad because that used to confuse a lot of people. I'm hoping this means that this is them, the design team, refining the grappled condition. And if I would welcome seeing the restrained condition disappear. Like if it, just delete the restrained condition and just have the grappled condition. And basically, if you're grappled, you have everything that you used to have as part of grappled and the restrained condition. It would just tidy things up so much more. It wouldn't confuse people as much as it used to. I like that idea a lot. Now, escaping a grapple no longer requires an action, which makes grappling weaker. I think it makes no sense. With the new changes that they're putting in place. I actually don't like this aspect of it. I think eliminating that means that I mean, there's certainly a lot of additional benefits to grappling now, but I still think that an action needs to be utilized to break free of a grapple, in my opinion. It is actually difficult to break free of a grapple. Are they doing this so that grapple does not become the go-to? Maybe that's what they're trying to do here. The other thing that's really interesting, and that is, like, grappled and shoved is now an attack. It's not a contest. I think that's a really good idea. That's a fantastic idea. It probably means that grappled and shoved is the simplest it's ever been. Okay, so the incapacitated condition changed, so you can't speak. There used to be some strange situations. You're incapacitated, but you can still speak. But now you can't speak, and you have disadvantage on initiative rolls. Thank God for that. That makes a lot more sense. Very sensible additions that create... because in the past we had some really odd possibilities in the current version of incapacitated. So I think this is a good change. There's a new slowed condition. It limits movement. It grants advantage on the attack rolls against the slowed creature, and you have disadvantage, whoever's slowed, to your dexterity saving throws. There's nothing problematic here. I think this is all fine. This new condition is fine. I'm liking what I see with this. I think that's very, very smart. All right. Yeah, how you award inspiration should be up to you. But using punctuation crashes chat window. Okay, I understand. Yeah, I feel like if inspiration is awarded or used in this manner, people might just take inspiration out of the game as a dungeon master. Yeah, I see where you're going with that, Lauren. Okay, so the refinements to the long rest. let's just say the long rest has already changed significantly from its first release. They're not clarifications; they're downright changes. And I've had this argument with people before. I've been around since the very beginning, did the beta test, did the alpha test, had to make a sodding video on the topic, and had to look up all sorts of information before they did a sage advice for the long rest, okay? And I can assure you it has changed a lot. But it's much easier to understand. What they've done with the long rest, that's much easier for anybody, whether you're a dungeon master or a player. It's a clear improvement in my opinion. But I also see that the short rest still is included, unfortunately, in the game. I don't like the short rest. I wish it was a variant rule, and it's not going to be a variant rule because it's clear that it's still going to remain. here's something that I thought was entertaining, and that is if a character has proficiency in a skill and a tool that is applied to the same task, whatever that task is, if you have proficiency in the skill that is going to be used and in the tool that's going to be used at the same time, then the check, you get advantage on the check or you get automatic success. This is actually nothing new. What they've done is ported that idea from Xanathar's Guide to Everything. I've talked about this in the tools videos that I've done. So this is actually, I'm glad this is being brought over as a default. I'm hoping it doesn't get lost in the text, this concept, because now it means that a dungeon master can just decide whether they're going to use advantage or automatic success, which I think most dungeon masters were already doing once they had a grasp of the game as it is, and they made it their own. And as I said, special attacks, the grapple, the shove, now work like an unarmed strike. It's essentially an unarmed strike. You either do damage, or you can grapple, or you can shove, and it's no longer an ability or skill contest, which it's really good. What I'm kind of curious is, does that mean the contest, the ability contest or the skill contest is that going to be eliminated from the game completely? Because that used to cause a lot of confusion for people. I'm actually happy with that idea. I think there are situations you might need to use it, but maybe it will become a variant rule. It's not clear at this present time, or maybe it's just something that would just be in the back burner and you use it as a backup if using armor class and a DC or difficulty class isn't going to work. But right now, it's just armor class, grapple, shove. Great. Cool. Thank you for the super sticker, Agile Monk. Agile Monk is a patron, by the way. And I can't believe how much money you've been throwing at me, man. You've been throwing a lot of money at me recently. Probably way too much. I'm feeling really guilty, actually. Actually, really, really guilty. All right, let me just make sure I catch up with chat. If I haven't read out your comment, it's just I'm reading it and responding as best I can. Yeah. So, look, there are a lot of changes that I feel like are good changes, and some of them not so great. But I mean, ultimately, other than critical hits and inspiration, that's a quick fix. That's an easy fix. I'm not too worried about that. That can be sorted out. You guys are going to get feedback and tell them, no, don't do that. Yeah, I do. And I do feel like they can. Look, I've never been fond of the short rests. It's not something that has actually helped the game. It's just made it easier for players to just never die. Which, look, I'm not looking out to kill player characters, you know. We're not out to just kill characters. But it's hard to create risk when you have that thing in the game. Right, so let's move on to backgrounds. Because I've been talking a lot about the core rules, and there's a lot to say about that. I want to talk about the backgrounds, because what they've done with the backgrounds I really like. I think a lot of people have failed to understand that you can make your own backgrounds. Even in the original Player's Handbook that we currently use, even in this thing here, you can do this. Like, you can just make your own backgrounds. You can make adjustments. And it's just required sign-off by the Dungeon Master. Now, we have some very tight guidelines and rules for building your own background, and some of it I really like and some of it not so like. I'd say there are two things I dislike, but the rest is cool with me. So first off, backgrounds, customizing them is now the default, and they will provide you with samples, but you don't have to use the samples because you make your own. And it's about time, in my opinion. I think this was the way to go from the very get-go. When they first released the game, they didn't do that, unfortunately, but this is a great move. Now, you get your ability scores. Your ability score bonuses are now tied to your background, and it's removed from the race. I do not particularly like that idea, but then again, I don't feel that races need to have all of the ability bonuses tied to a race anyway. And I'm happy to see some flexibility with that, but I feel that there are some races that do need to have like a +1 or a +2 to a particular ability score, because it made sense for their biology. And yes, there is variation within humans, but we're talking about fantasy creatures, people. Fantasy creatures do have a very particular way of doing things. I don't think it's going to destroy my interest in the backgrounds at this point, because ultimately in the end, will it really matter whether it's in the background or the race? I'm not too sure. I haven't really decided about that yet. Okay, so what you either get is you get a +2 to one ability score and a +1 to a different ability score, or you can go a +1 to 3 different ability scores. I think that's what we're trying to do here with the backgrounds. So you can put them wherever you like. But as I said, I still think there are specific races that need to have a fixed +1 or +2, and I think you could probably pick whether it be a +1 or +2. So something like a dwarf, I feel like Constitution, they need to have either you choose a +1 or +2 to Constitution for a dwarf, and the rest of it can go wherever the heck you like. It doesn't matter. Okay. Because I feel like it isn't still important to represent some of the race's biology and its uniqueness. And we're kind of taking a bit of that away. In fact, we've taken quite a large chunk of that away. A lot of the restrictions on how races work were often viewed as we don't like playing anything but a human. I don't think that was the case at all, although a lot of people view that as being the case. It's like fantasy races are a reflection of somebody attacking your own personal race in real world, and it's a bizarre concept. I don't know why people come to that conclusion. But let's get real. The world is mad right now, absolutely out of their tree. Okay, so did I catch up with everything? I'm trying not to feel guilty, but I do feel guilty. So next thing about backgrounds that I love, I think it's like awesome, and that is the 2 skills. You can select 2 skills. There's no preset list. You can take any of 2 skills that you like for your background. I think this is a great idea, even though people could really already do this. Like, people could already do this. It's not actually something new, but at least they're bringing it to the forefront. So great. Don't have a problem with that at all. A tool proficiency. You get 1 tool proficiency. Be chosen. You can choose it. Like, you can pick whatever you like. It doesn't matter. Fantastic idea. But then again, you could already do this. Okay, you get 1 language that you learn, and you pick it from a list. There's a list that you can use. Wonderful idea. I like the idea of including languages in your background. But you could again already do this with the current player's handbook if you wanted to. Now here's a development that I thought was interesting, and that is you now have equipment packages. Instead of the equipment packages that we got, which were not even, some of them were unbalanced, everything adds up to 50 gold pieces. So you can select a preset option or equipment package, or you can make your own. As long as the equipment package comes to 50 gold pieces, you're all good, which is awesome. I am sort of wondering if they have they stipulated what you can include in your equipment package, because it would be very easy in your equipment package to include a potion of healing for 50 gold pieces, and that's the only piece of equipment you have. It would be a silly thing to do, but somebody might think of it. But again, I think 50 gold pieces is probably fine. It's reasonable. I like this. I think it's an awesome idea. I feel like people were probably already doing that anyway. Here's the thing I don't like about backgrounds. You get a starting feat with your background, which seems ridiculous to me. Because weren't feats supposed to be optional? Apparently they're not. This annoys me a lot. This means that the game is not tailored to appeal to children, but teenagers and adults and the current player base. We're not bringing in enough people. Feats make things a lot more complicated. But I want to talk about the feats, because it's not like I'm dumping on all feats. But I don't want them to call feats anyway. I don't like the idea of... Now the reason is people keep saying that backgrounds are useless and they never do anything. Rubbish. You got tool proficiency, skills. You usually got 2 skills at least. You often got a language and you got equipment. And then you got another feature which was very nebulous, and a lot of people didn't know what to do with it as a player. There was negotiation required with the Dungeon Master with those features. And the problem is players don't really want to negotiate with the Dungeon Master. They want features that just tell the Dungeon Master what to do. That's really what it is. The problem is there are way too many people in those surveys were power gamers, and they just wanted a combat feat in the sodding background. And that pisses me off, frankly. I'm not happy with that. This means that feats aren't going to be optional anymore. It annoys me immensely. It adds another level of complexity to the game that doesn't need to be there. I want the complexity of feats to be part of the extended game when you're playing like advanced D&D, right? Not when you're coming in and beginning. That's just ridiculous. And by all means, whatever sort of things you're doing with the feats, because some of the feats are just like extra stuff. They're not combat focused. Not all of the feats that they suggest as first level feats for backgrounds are combat focused. Ditch the word feat. Call it something else. Please call it something else. And anything that's related to combat, ditch all of that shit because it's ridiculous. I hate this idea the most. And I know somebody's going to be saying, I am totally biased. Yeah, I suppose I am. But I'm thinking in terms of the game of getting 5-year-olds upward into the game, and feats just they annoy me. They annoy me a lot. It should have been an optional. It shouldn't have been tied in direct. I know somebody's going to say, but most people play with feats anyway. But you don't have the choice anymore. What's the problem with having? You want 3 engines, people. We want the very, very basic thing. We want the standard game where most people are playing, and then the advanced game where we have all these extra stuff going on, and we're losing that. It's not done yet though, because they haven't actually nailed it down. Hopefully they haven't. Let me just catch up with chat. The changes to backgrounds are flipped from the player's handbook instead of the no, that's right. I do not feel that backgrounds are great for new players. I feel like if you are 12 and up, they're fine, because 12-year-olds can handle anything. But yeah. Will we see a bad CGI meta magic duel between Jeremy Crawford and Tom Hanks? Maybe. Dear. Hi, Kim. How's it going? So can I just say that when they created backgrounds and what they did with backgrounds, I think people have failed to understand the importance of what they did with backgrounds in 5e, and that they were actually what made 5e stand out so much in many respects. It wasn't just some of the other changes they made. This was fundamentally a different way of thinking, because when you looked at them, it was never about combat. They were like all exploration. They were all about social interaction. They were all about everything but just beating the crap out of monsters. And I think that's, yeah. Okay, so let's move on from that, and let's actually talk about the feats, because there are a lot of them here, and I am running out of time. I'm going to go through these feats fairly quickly. What I'm also going to do when I talk about the feats is I'm going to tell you what I like and what I don't. You probably already guessed what I like and I don't. Oh my gosh, stop giving me... Ranger, you've given me more money. You're crazy. We say no to feats, no compulsory feats. Yeah, I don't have a problem with there being feats in the game as a variant or an option, but I don't want them tied in completely. Okay. So... what I would say is the removal of half feats, it looks like the half feats are gone, as far as I can tell at this present time. Maybe if we see feats that aren't tied to backgrounds, they will have half feats. I'm hoping that half feats will just go, because I thought they were always garbage. I do not like them. I did not think you got your bang for your buck. And I didn't really think that they were actually useful. I thought they were some of the worst design mechanics that Wizards of the Coast has ever put out, frankly. I don't think that they were worth anybody's time in buying them. They were horrible. So the half feats are gone. But levels to feats is another thing. So they're talking about putting a level to a feat. Again, I dislike this a lot. I know what they're trying to do. They're trying to sort of stipulate that some feats that are quite powerful you can't get to later on. I don't like that either. If it's too powerful now at first level, why are we allowing it at a higher level? Okay, I just don't get that. Because, I mean, higher level play, your characters are so powerful, you don't need magic items. You can really deal with anything, like anything. So I just don't understand why they think that putting a level to a feat is going to change that much. Here we go. The alert feat grants a bonus to initiative equal to your proficiency bonus. So that means that starting out, you won't be doing quite as well as you were before, because it used to be a +5. But eventually it will get as high as a 6. This allows initiative to be swapped now, so you can actually swap it. This makes absolutely no sense to me. Being able to swap out your initiative for somebody else's, like narratively, it's bonkers. I know it will be helpful to a party and a group, but again, I just don't see there's any necessity for it. And now characters can be surprised. So the alert feat doesn't say that you can't be surprised anymore. I'm fine with that, because doing that was actually really, really strong. It made alert super good as a feat. Like any class could take it. Anybody could take it, and it was always useful. And I don't like combat-focused feats, and that's what alert is, being connected to backgrounds specifically. But at least it's not as powerful as the current alert feat, which was certainly very overpowered, in my opinion. Should be a good move. What? I agree that basic and advanced rules split would be a good move. Yeah, Mike, that's exactly what we need. A third set. Look, all they need to do is strip back the standard one, and we've got what we need. It just doesn't take that much. You completely agree, Lauren? Okay, good. Okay. Background, a paragraph is enough. So the alert feat I dislike is a background feat. But then I mean, if I was taking a feat, I almost always took alert. The crafter feat gives player characters, my God, Kirby, thank you for the $50 super chat. You're crazy, mate. You're absolutely out of your mind. So what I have to say about the crafter feat is it gives you 3 tool proficiencies. And I love this. I think this is awesome, as long as you give the Dungeon Master enough tools and guidance around how to adjudicate tool proficiencies. And you got to take some of the stuff that's in Xanathar's and build it out a bit more in the Dungeon Master's Guide or somewhere, so they know what to do with it. So I love this. This is the sort of thing I would do. But don't call it the crafter feat. Just say you can take 3 skills or 3 tool proficiencies, and that's good. Like it's like a package deal. And I would be happy. So Kirby, your question. Hi Fred. First time catching you live. Really, Kirby? Oh my gosh. I have enjoyed so many vids of yours. Thank you, sir. Hey, thank you for your super chat, which is like bat crazy nuts. I am. Do you know, I'm really, really struggling to get all of the stuff that we did during the week to Patreon. It will get there, but this week and next week is tough, because I got another 4 of those Dungeon Master preps coming up. But I can tell you now, I feel like somehow with the new computers coming, the new cameras coming, I think we're finally getting where we needed to be. I'm actually really excited about what we're doing for the future. I really feel like we've nailed things down a lot more. Thank you, Monk. Wega Malco. I love the content. Okay, keep it up. Oh, well, we're going to keep doing it. I'm a normal person. I'm an average person. So, let's talk about the next feat. So love the crafter feat, just don't call it the crafter feat. I think that's great to tie that to backgrounds. The healer feat got an overhaul, big time. Battle medic requires you to use your healer's kit, which is good, that's fine, you always had that. And an action to allow a creature to regain the roll of 1 hit dice plus their proficiency bonus, which is fine, that's all good. Rolling, so healing re-rolls always allow you to re-roll a 1. So if you roll a 1 on your hit dice, then you get to re-roll it, which is kind of cool. And if you have a spell, so if you've got the healer's feat and you have a spell that is like Cure Wounds, and you roll really low and you roll a 1, then you can re-roll that. So hit dice you get to re-roll, and the spells, if you're rolling any kind of 1, you get to re-roll. I think that's a good idea, because rolling a 1 when you're trying to heal is kind of suck. This is still a very strong feat. I don't agree with it being attached to the backgrounds, because it's, again, a combat utility rather than a game utility overall. And I would like to have that tied to something else. So I'm not happy about the healer's feat. To be fair, the healer's feat out of all of the feats, many of the feats that they have, is one of my favourite, even the current one. But I don't want it tied to a background. No. I say no to that. I say no to that. Okay. The lucky feat. Oh, God. Allows advantage on a d20 dice roll a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus. So you used to get 3. Now you're going to get 2 when you start out with the lucky feat. And guess what? It can go up as high as 6, because your proficiency bonus gets pretty big. So you're going to wind up with advantage with your lucky feat more often, probably in the mid-ranges, than you did before, because your proficiency bonus will be not a 3, but a 4, and then a 5, and then a 6. This is still overpowered. It's always been an overpowered ability in the game. It was always a no-brainer that any class could take it. The thing about it is it can be used for outside of combat and inside of combat, but it tended to be used for combat purposes pretty much all the time. You can apply disadvantage to a creature's attack roll. It's still useful. I would say the overhaul of the feat, it has been nerfed, but not completely. Not in the lower levels that's been nerfed, but in the top end and mid-range it has not been. In fact, it's been made even better than it was before. So I like the idea of them nerfing the first part of it, but they've kind of ballsed it up by tying it to this proficiency bonus. I still dislike it being tied to a background, because it's not just combat, it's too versatile. It just does too much, and it's just too good. So every power gamer under the sun is going to say, take the lucky feat as part of your background feat at first level. It's just not smart. I don't like it. Next, Magic Initiate. So you get to add 2 cantrips and 1 first level spell with the option to change the selected spells, which I find bizarre, why we need to worry about changing the selected spells, but you can do this. Magic Initiate. So even though the spells can be selected, can be combat focused, I don't feel like Magic Initiate being tied to a background is like a game breaker for me. It isn't something that sort of like throws out my world, because if people knew what I would do with cantrips full stop, they would probably think that I was out of my tree. Because my opinion is that if you have a list of cantrips for your character class, that you should be able to cast all of those cantrips. That you don't select a portion of them. You can use all of them. That makes much more sense to me. Because these are the basics that you would learn. But they don't do it that way. It would certainly, there are more utility cantrips than there are damage dealing cantrips. So I would be all for that. Okay, so Magic Initiate, not a game breaker for me. I just don't want it to be called Magic Initiate. Just say you give them 2 cantrips and a first level spell. End of story. Moving on. Why get the lucky feat when the halfling and the humans basically do the same thing in their racial abilities now? I see what you're going. Yeah, yeah, it's fair enough to say that. Yeah, some versions of lucky are different. Yes, yeah, look, I'm talking about the lucky feat that they've got here. So when we talk about lucky for the human, or is it for the human? Lucky for the halfling, yeah, it is different. Yeah, it's a magic prodigy. It's the sort of thing, getting 2 cantrips in a first level spell is what you would do if you were playing a caster. It makes a lot of sense. I get it. So Mark, you're right. I agree. I'm all for that. Nowhere does the character get a spell book, get a patron, or any other reason to learn the magic. So I think you're right here. So Mark, when you get those 2 cantrips in the first level spell, I think they need to get an additional spell book or something that is connected to that magic. That would be nice. I don't think it's absolutely vital. I feel like it's still something that you would learn, you'd pick up. Like, yeah. But don't call it the magic initiate feat. Just say you get 2 cantrips in a first level spell. Okay, musician. I love musician. So you get to pick 3 musical instruments and then you are now proficient with them. I think this is a great idea. This is the sort of thing I would have done. I don't have a problem with this at all. Just don't call it the musician feat. Okay, inspiration after a rest for allies equal to your proficiency bonus. I think it's a much needed inclusion, the musician. I'm not so much... I don't know how to feel about awarding inspiration for playing a song after a short or long rest that now gives everybody inspiration in the party who is close enough to listen. But I'm not going to say that it should not be there. I'm undecided. I'm leaning more towards fine rather than no, because it kind of to a certain extent it kind of makes sense. I get it. A rousing song before you go off and do your adventuring day. I can get that. I can see that. So I'm not sold on it, but I'm not against it completely. Brenda, hello Brenda, how are you doing? I've been playing with the same group for 15 years or so. So this might not work for all groups, but we do is have players give me their backstory before the campaign, and then I assign a feat based on it. Yeah, I know a lot of people do this. I know people allow for a first level feat when they're starting out. I know a lot of people are doing this already. So what they're trying to do is just do what people are already doing, but not everybody does this. And frankly, most of the people that I know never ever answer the surveys that Wizards of the Coast puts out anyway. So they don't even know they exist. Okay, Savage Attacker. Hasn't changed much. It's a poor feat, always has been a poor feat. You get to re-roll a damage dice once per turn. But again, I don't want to see that as a combat-focused feat in backgrounds. I think Savage Attacker, I very rarely saw people take it in the first place. I don't really want it to be. I don't really want it to be there. Not as part of backgrounds. Get rid of that. I don't like that. Skilled. I like that. I like skilled. The concept behind it. You get 3 new skills, proficiencies. So there's nothing new here, but it's welcome being tied into backgrounds. So giving them an additional 3 skills, I like that idea. There are some times when you look at the number of skills you get, it's just not quite enough. And the list of skills is not that big anyway, but I think this is a good improvement for a background. Just don't call it the skilled feat. Just say you get 3 skills. Happy with that. No problem whatsoever. And it makes sense. It's tied to backgrounds, skills, backgrounds, yes, works for me. The Tavern Brawler. I hate this feat so much. A lot has changed. It still remains a completely stupid feat in my opinion. It's now just more complicated than it was before. Like Tavern Brawler was not that confusing, I guess. And the few people who took it sort of managed to figure out how to do something with it, but it never made any sense as far as I'm concerned. Everybody who's an adventurer should know how to beat the crap out of somebody in a pub. Okay? So now you get to re-roll damage dice if it's a 1 on unarmed strike. So if you roll a 1 on your unarmed strike for damage, you get to re-roll it. Unarmed strikes can do damage, or you can shove a creature 5 feet away. Sure. Okay, we could kind of do that before anyway, but now you can do damage and shove, so you're getting a little bit extra. And then finally, you get proficiency in hitting creatures with furniture. I really can't believe that they've given the Tavern Brawler feat. So when you pick this, you have proficiency in using furniture. Are you honestly crazy, people? Like, is it that hard to figure out how to rip off a leg off a chair and smack somebody with it? Did it really require that much skill to learn? I mean, is it that hard to pick up a bottle and smash it over somebody's head? I mean, oh my God. Oh, it's just, come on. Take that Tavern Brawler feat, wipe it with the ass, flush it down the toilet. It is just such garbage. I don't like it. I mean, I suppose you could say it's better than it was before, but it's just rubbish. I despise this thing. I don't want it tied to backgrounds. Even if it exists in the game, I don't want it tied to backgrounds. I just don't understand this thing at all. The last one is tough. As a feat, it hasn't changed, but I don't really, again, want it tied to backgrounds because it just gives you more hit points. So it's really more about survival and combat. And again, I don't think that's a good way to go with regard to the game. So I've had an awful lot to say about the feats. Not all of them I despise. Some of them I'm fine with. Some of them are not. But just get rid of the wording of feat and just keep the ones that are actually better for background. Otherwise, we're going to have the power gamers just having a good old time. Like, it's just not going to be funny. Their characters are powerful enough as it is. Right, next. Okay, so if I sound preachy, that's probably what's going on here. Now, there are a lot of people who are commenting here. Trying to keep up with the chat's going to be difficult. Yeah, could be Mark. Forcing roleplay, maybe. Song when you wake up, yeah, etc. No, I don't have a problem with that, really, not really. Hi, Kyle Armstrong, how's it going? I give inspiration to my players at the start of the session. Yep, I do that too. It's great that once per session they can all re-roll something. Yeah, but my players just don't use it because they're so powerful. They've told me they don't really need inspiration, so they forget to use it or they just don't bother using it at all. Yeah, Savage Attacker is part of a martial class. I know where they're trying to go with that, but I don't agree. I think this is probably a mistake. I think you just get rid of it. I mean, it's not like, look, soldiers and martial classes, well, soldiers or fighters, they don't just learn how to fight. They do actually learn other things, and that's where our opportunity to give them skills and tool proficiencies makes much more sense to me, even for a martial class. No matter what, the way I DMs doing this one. Yeah, inspiration. Yeah, you do it your own way, as far as I'm concerned. So again, I just don't. I mean, I know where you're going with this, but again, I don't care. If you're going to have the Tavern Brawler feat, just don't have it tied to a background. Yeah. No, Ranger. It's not serious business. It's the funniest feat under the sun. I mean, not as funny as the chef feat. I thought that was pretty funny. How do you get powerful players? My wimps and weaklings. Yeah. Well, interesting that your players are too powerful for inspiration. Look. A lot of them have been playing for a long time. They played before 5e. They are experienced people. They've not been playing like for 6 months or a couple of years. They've been at it for a long time. Yeah, people have bad moments, but generally they can cope with anything. So here's the thing. I don't even let them use everything in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. And they still beat the snot out of the monsters. And if people, I mean, I've talked about what I do to my monsters. Most people don't pump up their monsters nearly as much as I do, I can assure you. I have to. My group will just kill everything so fast. A brawler, I suppose you could call it brawler. Kyle. Yeah. All right. So let's talk about races. Half races no longer exist. Essentially, they no longer exist, which I'm not really surprised by, but it's not going to stop anybody bringing them back. Now, they did talk about if you want to have a half race, then you have to pick the abilities or the traits from one race. So if you've got human and elf, then you have to choose the human traits, and if you've got you either pick the human traits if your mothers are human, and if your father's an elf, then you pick the father elf traits. So so there aren't half races anymore, essentially. It's just flavor. That's it. I don't necessarily agree with this. I'm not surprised with it. But it's not going to stop people bringing them back into the game. And ultimately, when I was looking at this, I was like, even the things that used to be called half races, they just got rid of the word. It's essentially exactly the same thing. They just got rid of the word half. I think primarily because half races suggests, particularly with the half orc, the concept of wrapping. And we don't want to talk about wrapping. If you're confused about what I'm saying, I'm using a code word rather than using the real R word. Okay, I'm using the word rapper, as in the song rapper, but I don't actually mean the song rapper. I mean the other R word. Okay, then this is the half orc that really gives us the biggest problem, right? Yeah, improvised weapons, we'll see what they do with that. So, like human traits, you can choose to be small or medium. Fine, don't have a problem with that. Perfectly reasonable as an option. Powerful, resourceful. You gain inspiration after finishing a long rest. That's no big deal as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, I'm not really fussed about it at all, really. It doesn't. I don't feel like it connects particularly well to the human at all, but I don't really care. Skillful gains proficiency in one skill. Nothing new here. Versatile gains the versatile. You gain the skilled feat or another first level feat, which really doesn't change much because essentially that's the variant human, isn't it? That sounds like the variant human. So human is basically just the variant human from the current rules, which is frankly very boring as far as I'm concerned. I don't really have very much to say about human. I don't think it's particularly bad or good or anything like that. It's just boring. Yeah, exactly. Oh dear, let's have a quick look in here. Cultural bias races. Oh my god, here we go again. We try to bring in real world politics into a fantasy game. It just, I don't know. Anyway, the Ardling traits. It's a totally new race as far as I can tell, as far as they have indicated. So this is the new animal celestial race, which is essentially made to appeal to kids and to women who like animals. I don't have a problem with that. It's all right. It's fine. I kind of like humanoid animal races anyway. And like all the other races, essentially, are kind of like that anyway. If you Tabaxi, Tortle, Dragonborn, I mean, you know, it's just an animal celestial race now. That's essentially what it is. Fine with that. You can choose to be small or medium. Perfectly reasonable as an option. I don't have a problem with that. I know that like every race now moves 30 feet, which I just think is just silly. But I guess they don't want to put anything that would restrict you from playing that race. And would it ultimately make a big difference if you were moving 30 feet or 25 feet? It never changed people's decision to play a gnome or a halfling in the past. But apparently that's a change that needs to take place. So whether you're small or medium, you always move 30 feet. Let's just say that. All of them. Angelic Flight bestows limited flight speed for a bonus action, with it being used a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus before needing to take a long rest, which will just get banned in some groups. Like not all groups, but some groups will just say no. It is limited flight. It's not like you can hover. You know, if you don't land on something once you've travelled your speed, then you're down you go. It's not like they necessarily have actual wings as such. It's supposed to sort of represent the idea that you're kind of an angel. The Azamar, I thought, was kind of trying to do that, but apparently the Ardling is now that, or another kind of celestial. The Celestial Legacy grants a cantrip and a specific spell at 3rd level and 5th level, which aren't a big issue as far as I'm concerned. I've seen this before. I would say, though, that the selection of cantrip and 3rd and 5th level spells, they're kind of random selections. I don't think they fit the race myself. If you can explain it to me, great. But I feel like the selection is weird. And I have no more to say about Celestial Legacy and getting a cantrip and 2 spells. Damage resistance to radiant damage is fitting for a celestial race. It makes sense to me, but it's really going to get used. How many monsters dish out radiant damage? Like, it doesn't happen very often. The only time it's going to happen if you're dealing with celestial. Celestial against celestial. Like, that makes sense. Anyway. So that's the Ardling. I think there's some work that needs to be done on that. I think they need to make some adjustments. Now, Ardlings versus Tieflings and Azamar, essentially. Dairy, yeah. Okay, but put a race never published before in core. Well, they took away some stuff, so they had to replace it with something, didn't they? And this is the all-encompassing get the kids and the women interested in an animal race. Because the animal can be anything they want. They can play anything they like. I don't, frankly, have too much of a problem with that. Do you know what I mean? But I don't think the race is fully realised. Tolkien's Gimli tried to keep up with Aragorn and Legolas. Isn't PC enough? Yeah, big clue. I get it. Never let the real world junk affect your tabletop role playing. It will all still be there. Yeah, sure. Yeah. 3-foot tall character can move at the same rate as a 7-foot tall. Nice. Yeah. Apparently, little guys' legs move faster. That's right. It's like the little dogs. I think the little dogs aren't going to keep up with a big dog, frankly. Equal young dwarves. Really? Yeah, I suppose. Gotcha. Well, yeah. So, Big Kid, thank you for the super chat, the $5 super chat. I gave my son's Dragonborn wings and allowed him to stay up for 1 round. I think Ardling should work like that. So, yeah, I don't like the idea of something that sort of has limited uses. It's either it works all the time or it doesn't, or it's too powerful and don't give it to them. Yeah. So this is Big Kid's fix for dealing with flying races. I think I don't have a problem with having flying races, but I don't necessarily think that dungeon masters want to have need to be bound by having flying race. If you don't want to have flying races in your campaign, then you should be allowed to just not do that. And making it part of the core will cause a few problems. Just like putting feats, saying they're optional and multi-classing in the player's handbook, and saying they're optional when they wind up don't being optional. They should have, feats and multi-classing should have been in the Dungeon Master's Guide. That's where the optional rule should have been. But again, thank you, Big Kid, for the super chat, the $5 super chat. I do appreciate it. Lauren, does beg a question. At what point should Wizards of the Coast provide angels? Yeah, okay, yeah, I get it. Their abilities aren't really animal related. You're absolutely right. Exactly. Yeah, fly versus coast, disappear wings. Okay. Right, so now let's talk about the Dragonborn, because I actually do want to talk about the Dragonborn. Dragonborn traits are traits that sort of stand out. So you get Draconic Ancestry, still gives you damage resistance to 1 damage type related to the dragon you select. Nothing really new in that. The dragon, the breath weapon has changed. It's an action. You roll a 10-sided dice and you add half your character level. It still doesn't scale well, but it does give you a damage type that weapons don't. So I can see why they're trying to make it not quite as good as a weapon attack in some respects. But at higher levels, it's going to be doing all right. The only problem is a lot of people want to use the breath weapon like in conjunction with extra attack, and they can't. And I think what they really needed to do is they needed to bring down the damage output and stop scaling it the way that they are scaling it. I think what they really should have done is scaled it down to a 1d8 maybe, and made it plus your constitution modifier or something like that for those people who wanted to just breathe. Even a d8's pretty good, I'm still not too sure. I feel like the breath weapon for the Dragonborn needs to be fixed. What I will say is that Dragonborn can now have dark vision. Hooray! Finally, the designers got the memo. Dragonborn should have had dark vision. If out of all the races, Dragonborn should have had dark vision. Heck, should have had a limited version of blind sight. But I know they're not a dragon, but I still this is a good thing. I've been wanting this to happen for ages. So forget about fizzbands, baby. I think fizzbands is going to cause you a lot of problems. The concept behind fizzbands seems to be lost. Okay, dwarf traits. Here we go. You still have dark vision, which is fine for a dwarf, I guess. Maybe not 60 feet, 30 feet would have been fine. I don't like the idea of them being exactly the same sort of dark vision as a monster that lives in the dark. But then again, dwarves, not all dwarves live in caves and below the ground. Some are living above the ground. So I guess, I don't know. Dwarven resilience grants poison damage resistance. Okay. Advantage on saving throws against the poison condition. It makes sense. I know it's probably not quite as good in some respects to the old dwarven resilience, but oh well. And then dwarven toughness gives an extra hit die every character level, so you get an extra hit point, extra character level, which fits the dwarf. It makes sense that they have more hit points that are tougher and they can take more of a beating. I really like the forge wise. So you get 2 tool proficiencies, and they are stipulated what you get. You either get the jeweler's tool proficiency, the mason's tool proficiency, the smith's tool proficiency, or the tinkerer's tool proficiency. So out of those 4, you get to pick 2. A really excellent idea. It makes sense for the dwarf. I like this. I think this is a great one. Stone cunning gives the dwarf limited use of tremor sense at a range of 60 feet if you're touching stone, whether it be the ground, the floor, the ceiling, whatever. It makes sense. It is dependent on your proficiency bonus to use it, and I think that's really weird. I think that's stupid. You telling me this stone cunning switches on and off, like it runs out. Just look, if you're going to give them tremor sense and you're worried about them using it too much, just make it 30 feet and not 60 feet. Good Lord. How often is this going to come up? Even if you're in the Underdark, how many things are burrowing through the ground or through the stone that they're going to be able to pick up? Are you worried that they're always going to be able to detect anything coming? Because as long as they're standing on stone, they can feel anything coming from the back, the front, the sides, like above. I'm like, I do feel like the proficiency bonus thing is stupid, in my opinion. So, yes. Dragonborns should have dark vision. Absolutely. At least something better than normal sight. You've bought the books and, apparently it's all backward compatible. It's not. Only the adventures and the fluff from your campaigns is compatible and backward compatible. I'm sorry, people. All of the player option stuff is just not going to keep up. Yep. What is the area effect of the Dwarven Tremor Sense? 60 feet. I just said that. Yep. In turns. Love it. Yeah. Yes, you do have to activate it, which is fine, I guess. Yep. Yeah, Chris, you know how I feel, man. I'm passionate about that sort of thing. So let's forget about the dwarf and move on to the elf, because there are a few more to talk about. And I'm running out of time. So, elves still have dark vision. Yeah, I guess that's fine. Like, yeah, like everybody seems to have dark vision nowadays. The elven lineage grants a cantrip and a special ability at first level, followed by specific spells at third level and fifth level, which actually match the race. I think that's actually been done really well. What they've done with the elven lineage actually fits. It makes sense. I kind of like them. I actually think they're pretty good. Fey Ancestry grants advantage on saving throws, or so that's to avoid being charmed. That's a traditional concept. That's fine. Keen Sense gives you proficiency with perception. Yet again, a very traditional concept of the elf, which is fine. It fits. And then Trance means you don't need to sleep, and magic can't put you to sleep. Cool. Makes sense. It's always kind of been that way, right? I mean, look, maybe not so much the sleep aspect of it. There was always an element of that. An elf can finish a long rest in 4 hours while meditating. They are conscious. It's all pretty reasonable, although I'd have to say, out of everything, I think the elves are probably the best designed race that I've seen in this play packet, in my opinion. I think they've been done very well. Apart from maybe one. Then that's only a little problem. I'm running out of voice, so I'm going to just pop in one of these. Look, if they're going to have dark vision, just don't make it 60 feet when goblins have 60 feet of dark vision. It's just, no, don't do that. Stop it. Now, Drow lineage. Now, I'm going to break down the lineages. There's 3 of them for the elves. But generally, most of it's pretty good. And, like, it's not bad at all. Drow no longer have light sensitivity. I don't necessarily agree with that. It makes, like, this dark elf doesn't really look anything like the monster. The monster has it. Are they going to take it away from the monster? If they don't, that'll annoy me. Dark vision to 120 feet. It always had that before, didn't it? So, like, that's no change. Dancing lights, cantrip. Nothing really new here. It all fits. That's fine. The Fairy Fire spell at 3rd level to find hidden and hiding creatures. I think that's good. I think that's fine. It actually works. I kind of like that for a drow. And the Darkness spell at 5th level to hide. Nothing new. So if you want to hide in something, you got your Darkness spell. It fits. It makes sense. There's nothing new. I am fine with that aspect of the drow. And then the High Elf lineage. You get Prestidigitation cantrip, which makes sense to me, and the ability to swap it out after a long rest, which is silly. I like swapping out the cantrip. Stop it. Stop it. Prestidigitation does enough. You don't need to swap it out. I mean, good lord. That's the only part of this bit that I don't like. You get the Detect Magic spell at 3rd level to find magic. It's appropriate. It makes sense for a High Elf lineage. And you get Misty Step spell at 5th level to move out of trouble quickly. It helps any kind of mystical high elf. Again, I don't have a problem with Misty Step either. I'm fine with that, frankly. The Wood Elf is really interesting. Maybe not the strongest out of the elves, but I think it's actually works with what they've done here. So your speed increases to 35 feet rather than 30 feet, and you have Druidcraft. The cantrip. Look, I know a lot of people don't know how to use Druidcraft anyway, and I know it's not necessarily the best cantrip, but it fits for a Wood Elf. They're excellent choices as far as I'm concerned. I'm happy with that. The Long Strider spell at 3rd level to move faster is a good marriage for a Wood Elf. And then Pass Without a Trace, that spell at 5th level to hide with, whether it's forest or wilderness or infiltrating. It's a strong possibility now. You can do that properly. And for a Wood Elf, it makes sense. I actually like that a lot. I think that's going to work. Yeah. I'm not necessarily looking at a lot of the chat, so unless something sort of steps out, I'm not going to be able to comment. Okay, so let's look at the gnome. The traits for this. You still have dark vision, which is fine, I guess, yeah. Yeah. Gnomish Cunning grants advantage on intelligence, wisdom, charisma saving throws. This is crazy powerful. I mean, it's a lot more than it was before. Let's get real. Wisdom saving throws come up more often than intelligence. Intelligence saving throws very rare. Even the charisma saving throws very rare. Wisdom quite a lot. But you get 3 that you always get advantage on, which is very, very strong. I don't know how it necessarily ties into a gnome as such. But yeah, I don't know what to say about that. It's just really powerful. I am very much on the fence about that. And I'm also not convinced that it fits the gnome completely. Any negative conclusions about the Arcana? Not really. Not Dinomancer. I don't really have anything terribly negative about that aspect of Arcana. So then we have Gnomish Lineage. Grants a cantrip and 1 special additional spell. The Forest Gnome gets Minor Illusion. Yeah, okay. And then Speak with Animals. That spell a limited number of times, which seems like a big nerf compared to speaking with small animals. I'm not a fan of this approach. I actually prefer the idea that the Forest Gnome just is able to talk to all animals. It doesn't need to be small. They could be small. It could be big. It doesn't matter. They just speak to all animals. They know how to do that. Is it really going to be game breaking? Come on, people. I mean, seriously, just give them the sodding thing. So the spell thing with the animal, speak with animals thing, I just don't like that. Just let them speak to animals and be done with it. The Rock Gnome gets Mending and Prestidigitation, those cantrips, plus you get a tiny clockwork device. Very, very similar to what it was before. I think these combine nicely together. I was looking at it, I was like, oh, what's going on here? But I kind of see, and now the tiny clockwork device can do whatever you decide to pick from the Prestidigitation cantrip. So it can do a lot more, which was always a problem. You only had 3 choices, right? And that was it. But now you've got a lot more. I'm fine with the Rock Gnome as it is with regard to that aspect of it. Good. Well done. I'm not so sure. Should gnomes really be able to talk to plants? I don't know. I'm not too sure, Lauren. Yeah. Okay, now halfling trait. Brave gives you advantage on saving throws to avoid being frightened. I'm fine with that. Halfling's nimbleness lets you move through a space of any creature that is larger than you. Fine with that too. Luck lets you re-roll a 1 on a D20 test or any kind of D20 dice roll. This is very strong, but it's still fitting. It's been there before, you know. It's just been expanded a little bit. Natural stealth and naturally stealthy gives you proficiency on stealth checks. Fine with that. So this does mean that there is a way of getting around rolling a 1 on a D20 test. That you can re-roll it. So there's an exception to that general rule that, you know, modifiers and advantage and disadvantage don't affect 1s and 20s. Like, well, this does. So that's the exception to the rule. Tiefling. The traits here. You can choose to be small or medium. Fine with that. Which is perfectly reasonable because some of those bloodlines are quite small. So, yeah. And then you still get dark vision. I guess I'm fine with that too. Fiendish Legacy grants a cantrip and a special ability at 1st level, followed by specific spells at 3rd level and 5th level. Some of it works and others not. I am not a fan of all 3 of those legacies. Those Fiendish Legacies look like they need a lot more work. I don't understand 2 of them. I only like the Infernal Legacy, where you get fire resistance, makes sense. You get the Firebolt cantrip, makes sense. Hellish Rebuke, yep, I can live with that, that makes sense. And the Darkness spell at 5th level. So you get Hellish Rebuke at 3rd level. I'm fine with that. I'm actually all right with that at all. And then the Otherworldly Presence gives you Thaumaturgy, the cantrip. Okay. Not really a big deal as far as I'm concerned. I'm all right with that as well. Okay. The Orcish traits. So we don't have half orcs, we have orcs, but orc and half orc look pretty much the same. it has the same wording as the monsters of the multiverse, which I will talk about in the future. You get Adrenaline Rush, which is a bonus action to dash, and you get some temporary hit points as well. The temporary hit points is, okay, why? What's going on here? I get the dash thing because that's certainly part of the orc. Dark vision, as it should have dark vision. Orcs should have dark vision, as goblins should have dark vision. Powerful build seems pointless to me. I don't know what they were thinking there. And then Relentless Endurance has the traditional you stay up fighting on 1 hit point when you fall to 0. Like, that's always been what orcs and half orcs do. So there's nothing like, there's nothing super different with that. Like, but there's enough major changes in races, backgrounds, feats, and the basic core rules that we're not looking at 5.5. We're not looking at 1D&D. They'll do this again. We're looking at a 6th ed edition of Dungeons and Dragons. Hi Greg, off topic of the Lost Mine streams. So, off topic of the Lost Mine of Phandelver videos and streams, old and new. I've been going through your playlist in prep for my upcoming first campaign and found your videos extremely helpful. Greg, I'm glad to hear it. They aren't stopping. It's a weekly thing now. They just keep coming. Like, we won't stop. I am insane. That's how I am, Greg. So look, I have to go. I'm supposed to be in a Dungeon Master Roundtable like very, very soon. And so I need to disappear. Hopefully that's given you my opinion. I encourage you to go and look at the play packet. Read it, even if you don't play test it. And then respond in the surveys. So you have some effect on the game. Otherwise, they won't listen to you, and they'll just listen to everybody else who actually finds the survey. Who knows how long it will be up? It's going to be up on the 1st of September, so get onto it quickly. So thank you to my patrons. Thank you to everybody who's been watching my live stream and my videos. I do appreciate it. And I have to say thank you to all of the super chats that I got today. It was just bat nuts crazy what people were giving out today. The super chats and the super stickers were just amazing. I just can't imagine what's going on. I must be doing something right. Maybe I am finally doing something right, or I'm doing something better. Who knows? But wherever you are in the world, whether it be the morning, the afternoon, or the night, or the wee early morning, please look after yourself, your family, and your friends. Be nice to your neighbours, and hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.